Welcome back to Ozarks Fox. Elisa Raffa, our meteorologist, is joining us now to talk about her story. Elisa, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I am glad you got that picture too, because I also would not believe it if you had not taken that picture that you caught a fish.
No one would have. I was like, nobody's going to believe this. You take a picture right now. It was a smallmouth bass.
You even know what kind of fish?
It was a smallmouth bass. We put a worm on that was my bait, on the hook. We put the line in, and it literally, this guy is such an expert. It took, I'm not exaggerating, like 3-4 minutes for the fish to catch on.
That's pretty good. And beginner's luck. Beginner's luck.
Well,
say that.
Was
that your first fish ever that you got?
Well, I did some on the girlfriend getaway.
Oh, that's true.
But that was the second or third fish that I hooked, because the first one I let get away, and Captain LaPointe was like, "Reel it in, you're letting it get away." So any of our professional anglers will laugh at that, because I let it get away.
Well, that's good. Well, you did good though. Proud of you. That was cool.
Thank
Very
you.
cute. Well, with the first question, you know, when I was watching your story, I wanted to talk about the water temperatures first. So even though it is the unofficial end of summer, lake temperatures are at their warmest right now.
Right, because you have this whole season of heat, right, where temperatures are warm. They could be above average, or even if they're at average, temperatures are in the 90s. So you get a little bit of a lag in the warming of the water. So you're spending the whole season warming up, and at the end of the season, that's when it's at its warmest, because it's got all the energy from the whole summer, if that makes sense. So that's why they're the warmest right now towards the end of the summer. And then as our air temperatures start to get cooler going into fall, we'll start to see a gradual decline back in the water temperatures to some cooler levels. So if the water is too warm, they're going to get really warm really fast. If the water is too cold, they're going to get cold really fast. They don't really have a good regulation system within their bodies. So that's why the smallest changes in water temperature can really impact the fish.
As you were doing your research for this story, you found out that this is really not a huge issue for us here in the Ozarks, because the lakes are so big and diverse. Fish have different places to go. And one of the reasons why you said you found out about some local policies that were put in place 20 years ago to keep water quality a priority. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so David Castelletto with the Ozarks Water Watch was telling me that about 20 years ago, he said it was around 98, 99, there was a huge algae bloom on Table Rock, and it was so significant that it impacted the summer tourism down on the lake, which of course we know is a huge industry in the Ozarks. And it was so hurtful that immediately our local leaders were like, we can never let this happen again. So what they did was, and I believe that some of these ordinances are in place in Springfield, if I'm right in remembering what he said, that in our wastewater treatment plants, the way that we treat our wastewater to filter it and all that jazz, we use two things, nitrogen and phosphorus, and both of those are fertilizers like you would use on your lawn when it's too dry. Well, when you use those and they seep into our rivers and streams, that eventually seeps into the lakes, and they're fertilizers. They like to grow plants, so it will grow plants even in the lakes, and that was in part what caused that huge bloom that summer. So what they did was they put limits on how much nitrogen and phosphorus, how much of those fertilizer type chemicals you could use at our plants. This way there's less of it going into our waters. It keeps our waters cleaner, and it keeps the lakes more algae free. So he said because of that, or in part because of that, there hasn't been a huge bloom in 20 years. And they weren't sure how fast those changes would work, because there's some, we call it inertia. There's a little bit of lag in reaction time, right? If you make one change, it's not gonna, the reaction isn't gonna happen.
Make a difference.
Sometimes it's not immediate. So they were worried, like, ooh, is this gonna take too long? Will we have another bad summer next year before this gets better? He said it was immediate. Right after that, they were very pleased with how quick everything was able to respond and be better the year after that.
And one thing I learned too a couple of months ago when I was doing an interview with the City of Springfield's Environmental Services, Lori Duncan, she was telling me only rain down the storm drain, because even at home we can do things to help keep algae levels low in our lakes, and even grass clippings when you mow your lawn. If you let that grass go down the drain, that can also have an impact on the nutrients in our lakes and algae. So that's something we can also do at home to help with that here locally. Now, one big concern here is heavy rain. That's one of the things you talked about with David Castelletto. Can you explain?
Well, and this, we've seen this in our observations, heavy with a warming climate, the atmosphere, the water cycle gets supercharged because a warmer air can hold more moisture, right? In the summer, if you feel that humidity more, you feel the moisture in the air. So a warmer air holds more moisture, so when we get those rain that comes through, it's able to squeeze out more because it's like a more soaked sponge, if that makes sense, right? Our sponge is able to hold more moisture because the air is warmer. So we get rain to squeeze out much faster in a warming climate. We see it coming all at once. You know, we'll get 6 inches in a day instead of 6 inches over 2 months.
So it's not just as spread out as what, like you said, is supposed to be.
Right, it's not as spread out. So what that problem is, I mean, literally just, you know, Friday morning, we got 6 inches of rain just in 2 or 3 hours up in Benton County, right? So this is what I'm talking about, these crazy downpours. And when you get that to happen, that's when you get erosion because the rain is coming down so quick. It's going to take the soil, it's going to run it into our streams. You get all that runoff of the flash flooding. The water has nowhere to go because it came down so quick. And that's what he was saying is when you get these crazy flash floods, that's when you get all of this runoff to seep into the lake, the sediments, the nutrients, like you were talking about, the grass clippings, like all those things wind up in the lake, and then you can get an algae bloom from that just because it's running all of this stuff into the lake.
Meteorologist Elisa Raffa, thanks so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
And you can watch Elisa's story on our website, ozarksfirst.com. We'll be right back with more right here on Ozarks Fox.